Welcome to the Motherhood Mentor Podcast. I'm Becca, a holistic life coach, mom of two, wife, and business owner. This is a podcast where we will have conversations and coaching around all things strategy and healing that supports both who you are and what you do. So grab your iced coffee or whatever weird health beverage you are currently into, and let's do the damn thing. Welcome to today's episode of the Motherhood Mentor Podcast. Today, I have a co-host who I'm very excited to have on to have a conversation with. I have on with me Victoria Garcia. She is a first-generation Mexican-American bilingual thought leader, entrepreneur, and public speaker. She is owner and founder of two Colorado-based businesses, a Papacho Cacao, a chocolate company that sells vegan drinking chocolate, which I've tasted and experienced a cacao ceremony, which we'll probably get into, and it was amazing. And she also is the founder of Latina Owned Collective, a business community that celebrates and elevates Latina owned businesses. So thank you so much for being here with me today. How me and you met, it was the Unstoppable Conference in Greeley, and we got connected through a really amazing friend. And there was just this instant, I had this like physical, I felt myself just like leaning into you. And we connected here and there on Instagram. And then a couple weeks ago, she had reached out and invited me to a day retreat at her house, which we'll talk about. But I want you for a minute, just introduce us to who you are and a little bit of your story and what got you started in these businesses and just who you are today.
Yes. Well, first of all, Rebecca, thank you for this opportunity to be here with you today and have this heart to heart, girl to girl, woman to woman, mother to mother conversation. I love these types of conversations. I'm so excited that we are actually recording this because I typically have the most beautiful conversations with women like yourself, and they're never recorded. And I'm just like, oh, this conversation needed to be recorded because there's so much juice and magic and wisdom.
Yeah, someone needed to be a fly on the wall and hear us saying this.
100%. And so I'm so grateful that this is being recorded, and hopefully it will touch the hearts that it needs to touch. Because I too felt this magnetic energy coming from you as well at that conference you mentioned that we met at. And we have been following each other just on Instagram. I love your meme drop Fridays. I live for those. I'm like, yes, what hilarious stuff is Rebecca going to share today?
I love it.
So thank you for having me on. So I started both of these businesses for completely different reasons. My cacao business, and for those of you who don't know, because I know that it's not a common word, but cacao is just basically chocolate in its raw form. So before cacao becomes chocolate, it's literally just a seed inside of what's called a cacao pod. And that raw origin of chocolate is what my husband and I utilize to make our own cacao blends. Cacao is it's a very nutrient dense food. A lot of people don't know this, but chocolate in its raw form is food. It's extremely nutritious. And beyond the nutrient dense properties of cacao, it's also plant medicine. So it's very heart opening. And that was the reason why I started working with Cacao's Energy back in 2019 when I went on a retreat solo trip to Costa Rica. And then that's where I discovered cacao for the first time, and I discovered all the benefits that cacao has. And when I came back to Colorado, I wanted to continue working with cacao's heart opening energy. And that's how my husband and I created our 3 blends that we launched back in 2021. So that was a business, truthfully, that I wasn't intending on launching or starting, but I and we had benefited so much from cacao. It almost felt like very selfish of me to keep this to myself. And I was like, I need to share this with others, especially with women, because women have a very sacred relationship with cacao for many reasons. All right, so that's Papacho Cacao. And then Latina Owned Collective, I launched that in the summer of 2020. It just started off as an idea. It started off as a genuine desire to help Latinas based in Colorado to basically infuse more wealth into our community. I found out about the wage gap in the summer of 2020. And I was horrified because I had always viewed Latinas, including myself, as doubly worthy. because so many of us are bilingual, so many of us are bicultural. So in my mind, we had twice as much value to offer our employers, twice as much value to offer our clients. So when I found out about the wage gap and that, like, of all the racial groups in the United States, Latinas were earning the least amount of money, I was horrified and angry and honestly confused. So I was like, okay, well, I want to shine some light to this whole wage gap thing because this is insane. And I'm like, and in the meantime, this gap closes because, I mean, if I'm being honest, it probably won't close in my lifetime. So I was like, in the meantime, this gap closes. I was like, we can be proactive and take initiative to supplement our income through the money that we generate through our businesses. So
Mm.
I started hosting a lot of events where I bring together local Latina entrepreneurs so that we can invest in each other's businesses and stimulate and invest in our own economy. Like, I now get my hair cut with a Latina owned stylist in Denver. And if I want to, I don't know, buy new clothing, I go support my friend who has her boutique also in Denver. So I'm consciously investing in women owned, minority owned, Latina owned businesses because I know where my dollars are going. And
Mm.
as much as I love Target, all of Target, I also love my amigas, my friends. And I know that my dollars are going to my friend, into her family, into her baby, into her household. And that's one thing that you and I have in common is we're both mothers, we're both wives, we're both entrepreneurs. And it just feels so good to support a fellow woman, a fellow mother who's out there hustling and just wanting to leave a legacy of wealth and love for her family. So it's a little bit about both of my businesses.
I love hearing more about your businesses because I got to know a little bit more about you, but I haven't gotten to know like all about what you do and the heart behind why you started it. I love what you were just saying about women supporting women. And
Yes.
when you invited me to this, so it was a cacao ceremony and a day retreat, and there was this instant, like, I think most women have this aching desire to be in ceremony with one another and to be in ritual. I think so many of us, we're living these individualistic lives where we have these routines that are so masculine. They're so like, what do I get out of this? Or what do I give to others out of this? Like, you look at all of the routines that women are focusing on in either entrepreneurs or even moms. And there's like this, I have to have this outcome. I'm going to this to get something. And what was so beautiful at your retreat, and one of the biggest things for me, is being in a space where it was ritual. It was doing something for the sake of doing it, for the sake of being present, for receiving. You know, it was so beautiful when you were handing out the cacao of, I give this to you with love, and then I receive this with love, and learning to be in a room of women, being in a room of women where I could both receive and give. And it felt so heart opening, like you said, heart opening. And that leads me to just, I'm curious, what started that journey for you? This like getting women together and this heart, what made you like open up to and look at the heart so much?
That's a really great question. The honest answer to that is what got me started on that journey was the fact that my own heart was so closed for
Mm.
so many years. Like, my heart was very closed, very shielded, very protected, very closed off from women, closed off from myself,
Mm.
closed off from, like, I don't know, feeling in general,
Yeah.
because I have, as I'm sure many of us have, I've gone through a series of very, very traumatic events, and I'm an extremely sensitive and emotional person. And for those of us who are very sensitive beings, like I am, your heart can only handle so much before it totally closes off and closes up and says, like, nope, no thank you, like, this is a little too painful. i'm just gonna I'm just gonna create a bunch of walls and lots of protection, and so that I don't feel anything anymore. The
Mhm.
problem, though, when you close off your heart, is that, yes, you close it off from feeling pain, but you also close it off from feeling joy and bliss and
Yeah.
compassion and empathy and all these other emotions that are just so beautiful. And like, truly, what is life without love?
Yeah.
And so I had closed my heart off from feeling love and also from feeling my own love first and foremost. So when I went to Costa Rica in 2019, I was in this place in my life where I had hit rock bottom. Like I couldn't go any lower. I was like, this is rock bottom. Like, I don't even, this, like, I feel like I was several levels below rock bottom. Like, that's how bad things were for me. I think on an emotional, spiritual, emotional, all the levels, psychological, I was just at the lowest of the low in my life, that point. Just like all the pain that I hadn't dealt with, all the pain
Mm.
that I was just kind of shoving under the rug and just being like, nope, I'm just going to deal with that later. I'll just deal with that tomorrow. I'll just deal with that next year. It just like
Mm.
exploded. It just all came out in 2019.
Yeah. And you
So I
were a mom in
literally had to
2019, right? Like, I'm just
totally,
putting
yeah,
that context
mom,
in of
wife,
like, this is happening in the context of motherhood too.
100%. And I
Yeah.
knew as a mother, I needed to protect my child and my family
Mm.
really from the pain I was experiencing. Because I was like, this has nothing to do with my son. This has nothing to do with my husband. This has
Mm.
everything to do with me. And if I don't heal this, I'm going to end up causing them unnecessary pain, which will then require more healing. And it's just like this insane snowball effect. And I'm like, I don't want to spend 4 decades of my life healing, right? And
Mm.
so I was like, I need to self isolate and I need to figure out what the heck is going on. So then that was the impetus behind me going to this retreat. Or it wasn't really a retreat. It was like, it's called an eco village. So it's this eco
Mm.
village in Costa Rica called Pachamama. You can Google it. It's incredible. Highly recommend it to anyone who's interested in going. So I stayed in this eco village for 2 weeks and I love chocolate. I've always loved chocolate. I've always been a big fan of chocolate, consumed it my whole life. Like, I love chocolate. And when I was in Costa Rica, I tried cacao for the first time in my life in its raw form. I'd never had cacao before.
Mhm.
And I was shocked when I had what was called a cacao shot. That's literally what it was called on the menu.
Mhm.
And I ordered it out of sheer curiosity. I was like, huh, what's a cacao shot? I'm like, I
Can't
think
go
this
wrong
is
there,
chocolate.
really.
Totally. I was like, I think this is chocolate, but I'm not entirely sure. I don't know. I'll just order it, see what happens. And so I drank it. And like in less than 10 minutes, I was blissed out of my mind. I was
Mm.
euphoric. I was happy. I was like skipping in the rainforest and like looking at all the butterflies and the flowers. And I'm like, oh my God, life is so beautiful. And I felt high. And I truly thought that the woman who had prepared my cacao drink had put something in it. I was like, she must have put like mushrooms in here. Like, what is going on? Because I was like I've had chocolate my whole life, but I've never felt like this before.
Yeah.
So I went back to the girl who prepared my drink and I'm like, what did you put in this? Like, be honest. Like, did you put something in my chocolate, in my cacao drink? And she's like, no, no. And she responded in Spanish and she's like, no, esa es la magia del cacao, which means, oh, that's just cacao's magic,
Mm.
or the magic of cacao. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And then her and I went down this rabbit hole of like what cacao is. And that was the first time I'd ever heard about cacao as a plant medicine and the heart opening properties of cacao. So what I had, or rather what I was experiencing in that moment, I didn't know it. I didn't have the language to articulate it. But what I was experiencing in that moment was the beginning of my heart opening. And that's why I felt so blissed out because
Mhm.
my heart had been so closed off. So the second it opened up just a little bit, then like joy and love and bliss just like
Mhm.
flooded in. And I was like,
Yeah.
what is going on? So those 14 days that I was in Costa Rica, I had a cacao shot every single day. And every single day, my heart just opened up a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And I just had the most profound, like magical, incredible healing experience while I was in Costa Rica. So when I came back to Colorado, I told my husband, who's a chef, I told him about this magical cacao drink I had in the rainforest. And I was like, can you please help me recreate it? I'm like, I want to keep drinking this in Colorado. And
Mhm.
so we played with a bunch of different, like ingredients and recipes, and we didn't figure it out. We didn't like create the final recipes until 2021, but we came very close to creating recipes in 2019 and 2020 that were comparable or similar to.
Mhm.
So because I went to Costa Rica in like the summer of 2019. So the remainder of 2019 and all of 2020, I literally was drinking a cacao like every single day because my heart just at that point in my life, it just needed it. It craved that heart opening because I had been so closed off for so many years.
Mhm.
And so basically for a year and a half, I worked very, very intimately with cacao's energy. I became familiar with cacao's energy just like one on one. I had no desire, I had no plan at all to start a business, like whatsoever. It was never something I foresaw. It was never something I was like, oh, I'm starting a cacao business. Like, no, absolutely not. That that energy or that desire or that calling came to me at the end of 2020 because again, I had benefited so much from it and it truly didn't take that long. Like a year and a half is really not a long time. And in fact, I experienced basically immediate effects. But working with cacao's energy for a prolonged period of time, it just unfolded my heart even more. And when that happened, what I learned, which is what I'm still implementing today, was that my body has two brains. Like I have,
Mhm.
we all have, not just me, we all have two forms of intelligence within our bodies. Like our brain, of course, is a form of intelligence, but our heart is also a massive form of intelligence. And what cacao taught me is that your heart will always lead you in the direction of your dreams. It will always, it's like a compass. It will always point you in the direction of like what you want to create, what you want to do, how you want to serve the world. So it's like, listen to your heart. Listen. That's where that phrase, like, listen to your heart, because they will always point you in the direction of your dreams. And then what your brain does is your brain simply helps you strategize and plan to make those dreams come true. The brain doesn't do that though. The heart points in the direction of the dream of your dreams, and then the brain is like, okay, here's the plan. Here's how we're going to make your dreams come true. So that's a
Yeah.
little bit behind why I started up Apacho Cacao.
Well, and I think what's so cool about this story, and I'm thinking of so many moms, so many women who I hear this, they come to this breaking point. They have this moment of like, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep going in the way that I'm going. I can't there's some sort of like moment where there's like they realize there's a choice. And I think what's so fascinating is one, you took action, you did something, but how interesting that it was literally just ordering something off of a menu that you wanted, that you desired, that you had a feeling about, not this like knowing. And I think so many moms, they like get to the season where they're like, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what I like. I don't know what my hobbies are. I don't have this sense of self. They're disconnected from their heart. They're disconnected from this feminine intelligence, which is not just in women, it's in everyone. But they're disconnected from this whole part of them. And what I love so much is that you literally found something that you loved, that made you feel good, and that you pursued it. And what's so, so cool, you pursuing that brought goodness and life to your family and then to the community. And now like profit and other women, like I think women are so there's that like cute, like self-care is selfish, but I don't think it's a logical thing. I don't think women are logically sitting around thinking it would be selfish for me to do this. It's a felt sense in our hearts of if I take up this space, I'm taking it from someone else. But what they don't realize is that like fighting back against the whole self-care is selfish doesn't actually work. But what does work is stop worrying about this whole self-care or selfish or mom guilt, whatever the hell we're calling mom guilt these days. Not just what do you need? Yes, we need to make sure you're meeting your basic needs, but what do you want? What do you want? What do you like? What do you like? What colors do you like? What music do you like? What food do you like? Start pursuing that. How do you like to move your body? What kind of women do you like to hang out with? What kind of books do you like to read? It could be the smallest thing. Like me creating this business started from me reading books, which led to me reading podcasts, which led to me hiring my first life coach. I didn't even know life coaching was a thing until I found it. All of that came from pursuing that heart-led intelligence. And I don't think our culture I think our culture is just now starting to value and give language and give the respect to our feeling, to our emotional intelligence, because for so long, emotions have seemed like this lower level intelligence, which is so fascinating because in so many ways, I think our emotional felt sense bypasses so much of the mental health drama that people run in circles around of overthinking and anxiety and intellectualizing their problems. And it's like, if you could just get below your head, below your throat, like, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to set this boundary. And I was like, I'm like, you will when you're back to connected to your feeling, to your heart center.
100%. I mean, I couldn't agree more with everything that you said. And I too was lost in that world of emotions are a sign of weakness. And I joined the entrepreneurial community in 2016, which is heavily male dominated. I was usually the only woman in the room. I was almost always the only Latina in the room, filled with a bunch of, typically white males. And so in those environments, oh my God, the heart is so not there. Like the heart is so not present. Like there's no emotions. Like all these
Or
men are
value.
showing up like at all. Like all these men are showing up super stoic, very like all business, no feeling, no heart. And so what did I do? I just started mimicking or mirroring my environment because I was in this like male dominated business world since 2016. And I was like, oh, okay, so apparently this is how you need to be successful. However, what I was noticing was that I was trying to be something I'm clearly not. Like I am so not a guy. Like I'm incredibly feminine. I love like sparkles and colors and like butterflies and unicorns. Like I'm such a girl. And so with my essence, like what my essence is, I was working against my essence. And I was shockingly, not shockingly, having no success, even though I was pushing and pushing and pushing and like running around like a man essentially, packed schedule, doing proposals left and right. I had a business, a video marketing business at the time, like scheduling myself like back to back to back. Like I was not really having results.
Mm.
And so then I had to kind of take a step back. And that's this after this period of time of just like hustling, doing, pushing, exerting, and nothing was happening. And the needle wasn't really moving. I took a step back and I'm like, okay, clearly I'm doing something wrong. And so then 2019 happened, then 2020 happened, and then 2021, which is when we launched our cacao business, I was like, okay, what I was doing wasn't working. I need to do something completely different. So that's when I fully 100% leaned into my femininity. I leaned into my womanhood. I leaned into my emotions and I completely unleashed my intuition. I've always been highly intuitive, highly sensitive. But again, Rebecca, like you said, emotions and feelings are always viewed as a sign of weakness. At least that's the perception that we women or we humans have received forever and ever and ever. It's like, don't be emotional, don't cry, all these things, which is like absolutely not true because to be vulnerable with yourself, first and foremost, and then to be vulnerable in public is like literally one of the hardest things you could ever do. Vulnerability is so difficult. And the only way to tap into your vulnerability is to tap into your heart center. So anyway, so in 2021, I was like, okay, instead of pushing, exerting, which is a very masculine energy, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to lean into my femininity. And more than anything, I'm going to open myself up to receive and to magnetize what I want for me and for my family and for my business and for my life. And so when a woman, what's the word? Like fully opens herself up to her feminine essence, like literally magic happens. Like we women we have by nature, our feminine energy is to receive. Our feminine energy is not to push out and to project. That's very masculine energy. Our energy is like, let's open ourselves up to receive and let's attract to us what we want. Of course, like you said earlier, taking aligned action. We're not just going to like sit on our couch and like open our hands up and be like, okay, I'm ready to receive. Yes, energetically open yourself up to receive, and then take aligned action and literally watch the magic happen. Because we had so much success with Apapacho, and it was effortless. I wasn't pushing, I wasn't exerting, I wasn't doing all this crazy hustle culture crap that I was taught to do. I was just being my own feminine self and magnetizing to me the people, the opportunities, and the magic that I wanted in my life. And it came, and it came in like this abundant, like tidal wave. It was incredible.
Mm. Yeah. So I'm wondering, I'm just thinking, I'm sitting here like, oh my gosh, yes, I'm sitting here just like nodding my head. And I know that there's so many women who the concept of like leaning into the feminine or their heart center, like they're like, what does that mean? Like, what do I do? And one of the powerful things I think you said, and I wanted to like piggyback on this. Well, you didn't mention this specifically, but when you're talking about the masculine space, something comes up in me I think it's so powerful. Obviously, this is a podcast for moms. I mostly speak to women, and feminine and masculine energy. I think our culture loves using the phrase toxic masculinity. And I think a lot of times it's just associated to men. I see masculine and feminine as two different, very powerful energies that any person can embody. And unhealthy, unhealed masculine energy is just as unhealthy for the men as it is the women, but it's highly accepted and praised in men, and they usually can get away with it. In the same way that women, when they're in their unhealthy feminine, we tend to just be like, oh, that's her just being a woman. And it's like, no, that's an unhealthy expression of this energy that can be really healthy, but because it's unbalanced, because it's on the extreme end and doesn't have any masculine energy, it's been thrown off balance. So what for you, like if someone's listening to this and they're like, okay, what does it even mean to be in my feminine energy or be in my heart space? Is there like a tangible way that they can start connecting to their heart? I mean, you mentioned cacao is something really powerful. So I'm wondering if, is there a ceremony that you do? Is it just the plant medicine in and of itself? Is it the ritual that you do with it? Or even the other direction too, of like, what does it look like to implement and integrate on a daily level of being in your feeling for you? Like, what's your experience with that?
So the very quick, short, hopefully easy to remember answer to that is this mindset shift from do to be. That took me years and years and years and years to understand that, because we are a culture that's so used to doing. What am I going to do? What action am I going to take? Versus being that energy that you want to have or attract or receive. So I'll give you an example. When I was working with cacao in 2019, 2020, just privately, I would drink a cup and I wouldn't do anything. Well, I guess drinking is kind of like doing something, but whatever. I would drink my cacao and I would sit there and I would just allow myself to be, to know that in my beingness, I was worthy and whole already. That, and so in that process of allowing myself to just be, I discovered that I've been whole all along, that I didn't need to exert or do or achieve or perform, again, masculine energies, in order to have worth or have value or have relevance, because I had so associated my ability to perform and to execute and to do with my value, with my worth. And it was only in my stillness and in my ability to just be that I discovered that my worth and my value have always been innate, and they are not tied to my ability to I don't know, produce results, which is again, a very masculine energy.
Yeah.
So the easy answer here is switch doing to being.
Yeah.
Or if you can envision the word do, just put like an X over it and then replace it with the word be.
Yeah.
Just be.
Well, and even in what you just said, I think it's okay that there isn't an easy, oh, here's a one-step process, because that in and of itself is like, how do we perform the feminine? And it's like, you can't, you don't. It's coming back to who we are and not just what we're producing. And one of the ways I like to think about it, and one of the ways I describe it to clients is, when did little girls learn how to perform dance versus dancing? We are a culture that does not dance. There's no dancing. There's no celebratory, like, let's get together and just dance to music. It's little girls get on a stage and they try to perform this step to this step to this step at the right time, at the right moves. And you learn exactly how to position your body, exactly how to do it in the right timing, exactly in sync with everybody else. That is performing. There's a difference between a girl on stage performing a dance, which is beautiful. It's an art. It's a creative act. There's nothing wrong with it. But that is the way that most of us have learned how to live. We have learned to do a performance. We have learned, someone tell me 1 through 10, and then I'll do it. And then when we become mothers and we're like, I can't do all of these steps. I can't tap dance and do point at the same time. And yet you're expecting me to do these at the same time, versus cut all of that noise. The curtain's closed. I'm going to put on a song, move to it. Feel it in your body. Feel it in your soul. How does this music move you? You don't have to move the music. You get moved by the music. You just receive the dancing. You're like, it's just something that's happening with you and to you. And like, it doesn't hurt anybody. It doesn't look as cute. But it's so much more fun. I mean, I used to be obsessed with the show So You Think You Can Dance. And one of the common things that the judges would say is they like, you're doing all the right things, but I can tell your heart's not in it. I can tell that like you don't feel it. And you can witness that in other people. You can see, you can feel it. And there's not a way to describe it, but you're like, man, they're doing all the right things, but it feels off. And that's because they're doing all the right moves, but they're not embodied in it. And that's how I like to describe that difference between head masculine performing and like heart-led embodiment and leading from the heart and being. Like, that's what I think of when I think of being. I'm like, okay, sometimes I'm still and sometimes I'm moving, but I'm literally just like letting myself exist instead of forcing myself into this performance act of what I should do. It's okay, what's next? What's next? And it's messier. I don't know your experience, but like, it's messier. It's harder to explain. And I don't have this like easy telling other people why. I don't have all of my reasons anymore, but I also don't need them. I don't need to like explain to you why I'm doing this. I just am. Does that resonate to you? I'm just curious what your response is to that.
Yeah, I do resonate with that, because I wouldn't say that my life is messier ever since I leaned into more of my feminine nature. But I would say that I've had to really, really, really learn to trust myself and to trust my intuition. That process of learning to trust, that can be really messy, because when the head gets in the way, sometimes, I don't want to say mistakes happen, but sometimes you're like, oh, shoot, darn, I should have listened to some people call it their gut, right? I just call it my intuition or your heart, whatever word resonates the most with you. So when I was in that window of time where my head wanted to keep leading my life, but my heart was taking hold of the steering wheel, essentially, there was this tug of war for power, right? It's like the head was like, no, this doesn't make sense. We shouldn't be doing this right now. And the heart was like, yeah, but this brings me joy. So like with your dancing example that you gave, I don't know if you've ever participated in an ecstatic dance event. I have just once. And it's so interesting what you said, because at the beginning of this ecstatic dance event, I was a professional dancer for 7 years. So when you
I
talk
did not
about
know this.
performing, I
Oh
know
my gosh.
exactly. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean because, well, I mean, I did it professionally. And so
Yeah.
I noticed at this ecstatic dance event that I attended that the first, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 minutes of it, I was performing. But
Mm-hmm.
then I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, who am I performing for? I'm like,
Mm,
nobody's watching me. Nobody cares. Everybody's in their own little bubble doing their own little ecstatic dance thing that they're doing. And as soon as I removed that, it was almost like preconditioned desire to perform or whatever. I was like, psh, whatever. I'm just going to dance, like you said, according to what my body wants to do, according to what the music is doing or the drums are doing. And when I did that, oh my gosh, like the sense of happiness and joy and fulfillment that came from a place of dancing from my heart, as opposed to dancing to perform or dancing to please or dancing for applause.
mhm.
Totally different experience. So that perhaps is another way that a woman can get in touch with her femininity, is like, give yourself permission to move and sway your hips and sway your arms and your shoulders and your hair. Like that, all of that is very feminine nature. And we have been like raised to believe that if we move in these sensual, beautiful ways, that it is, I don't know, wrong or unholy, or it's,
Mm,
I hate the word slutty, but it's a word that's used so much. And
yeah.
it's something that I don't want to reclaim that word, but I'd rather replace it with embodied. Like we
Yes.
are women, we are sensual
Yes.
and sexual and beautiful by nature. That's just like our bodies are designed. That's why literally like sculptors would make sculptures of women's bodies. Like we are beautiful. We have beautiful
Mhm.
bodies, and it's okay. And we can lean into our beauty and we can lean into our sensuality. And as and the key here is to remove the sense of shame that many of us were raised with. As soon as you remove shame from the equation and you allow yourself to just let love flood in, like
Mhm.
self-love first and foremost, all those old narratives, they just start like dissipating. They just start like floating away because they're just not relevant anymore.
Yeah, I love that we've moved into movement, because I have really found, as a somatic coach, my experience, what led me into somatics was I realized that movement is what brought me back to my body and to being a person in my own being, and not just being in performance, not just being in this people pleasing, who am I making happy and what am I checking off my to-do list? Like I felt motherhood woke me up to my body in a very intense way. And it was very hard because I was both completely dissociated, or I felt completely flooded by my emotions. And movement became this bridge of reconnecting to my heart and to my feeling, and I think to myself. Like when moms say like I don't know who I am or I don't feel myself, it's like learning how to sensationally feel your body and move your body from a place of you are moving it, instead of something else moving you, instead of something you doing all of these should lists and like mentally thinking about yourself. You start feeling in your body what it's like to move. And movement for me was so powerful. And especially when I started realizing that emotions are an energy of motion, right? Like anger and all of those things, they were something that needed to be moved through my body. And booty yoga was one of those things for me, or kickboxing, or moving in a way that was more feminine, and feminine in that, like, a lot of the ways we move in our culture are like these very masculine workouts, which I love weightlifting. It's like one of my favorites, but also dancing, and swirling and like doing that with other women, booty yoga has been so, so powerful for me to be able to just dance, to listen to music, to be emotional, to be in a place where, you know, it's funny. I've been doing booty for a while and I'm about to be certified in it. And my daughter the other day, she was like, well, are you good at it? I said, it doesn't matter. It's not, it's one of the first things I found in my life where I was like, it doesn't matter if I'm good at it, because that's not the point. The point is not to be good at it or burn calories or get in shape. It is literally because I want to, because I like it, because it feels good, because I like the way I feel when I'm done. I like who I'm being when I'm doing it, but also when I get done, I'm reconnected in a way that I hadn't ever felt before. Like, and so just having a way to move my body in a way that like, it wasn't for anyone else. It wasn't for the way that I looked. It wasn't for the way that I performed. It was literally just because it feels fun to dance and shake your hips and do these hard things and sweat and be in a place where like, I think our human bodies at a biological level, we were made to dance and sweat and cry, and like sensuality is just sensation. So if you feel cut off from your sensuality or sexuality, start thinking about sensation and taste and texture. And like cacao, that was one of the beautiful things at that ceremony of like smelling it and tasting it and feeling the warmth and just reconnecting to it. Do you feel like being reconnected to sensation was a part of your journey when it came to like what you experienced with cacao? Was that a part of it for you?
100%, because again, because I was coming from this like heady masculine space, I was not at all used to being in the present moment. I was always thinking about either the past and like, yeah, like, oh shoot, you know, what could I have done better at this meeting? Or why didn't that client sign this proposal? Or shoot, I didn't, whatever, send out the email I needed to send. So I was living in the past, and I was also living a little bit, or rather a lot bit, in regret and the could have, should have, would have mentality or energy space. Or I was living in the future, like goal oriented, just being like, okay, what's my 90-day plan? What's my 6-month plan? Like, what are my goals for 2020, whatever year it was? So I was rarely, if ever, hardly ever in the present moment. And presence is a state that male or female can benefit and heal us so much, because at the end of the day, this present moment is truly all we have. And that's another massive, powerful lesson that cacao taught me, is the beauty and the absolute gift of presence, of a full embodied presence, like allowing myself to be fully present, allowing all of my senses to be activated with this cup of cacao became part of my personal ritual when I was, you know, having my ceremonies here with just myself and the cup of cacao. I would take a moment to activate all of my senses, just like I facilitated during the women's retreat during the cacao ceremony that I was facilitating for. I did that for you ladies because I did that for myself for, you know, a year and a half. And I discovered how healing and how nurturing and just how like grounding it is to give yourself full permission to be present, that it's okay. You can give yourself permission to be present. And in fact, you'll find so much more joy in the present moment, as opposed to focusing on the past and what you didn't do yesterday and what the goals you didn't accomplish last year, or, you know, what your goals are for the remainder of the year, or Q1 or Q2 or Q3 or Q4, like all that very masculine energy that's all about like it's like goal oriented future planning. And it's great and it's necessary. And we do need to live our lives in that way. However, this is a yes and, like, yes, let's plan for the future, and let's give ourselves permission to be present in this moment in whatever it is that we are doing, whether we are having a conversation with a fellow woman or we are sitting in ceremony with a cup of cacao, or we are with our children, giving ourselves permission to be present, because that endless mental motherhood to-do list will always be there. It's never
Never
going to
ending.
go away.
Yeah. You
It's
can't win
never
it.
ending.
Yeah.
No, and that's okay. We're not meant to win it, because it's this ongoing, in perpetuity, never ending thing. So it's like this fruitless pursuit. It's like the image I get in my head is like the carrot dangling in front of the horse. It's like that. So it's like, stop trying to eat the carrot. You'll never be able to eat it. It'll just frustrate you. And then you'll miss your whole entire life. You'll miss your children's life, because you're
Mm.
always like chasing this dangling carrot in front of you. And so
Yeah.
instead of just allowing yourself to be really present in every single moment, and when you live your life that way, with that much presence and that much intention, oh my gosh, everything becomes a miracle. Everything becomes like almost like high definition, high color, because you just start to appreciate everything that's around you all the time. And that level of joy, you transmit that to your children. You transmit that to your partner, and you certainly transmit that to your clients, your customers.
Yeah, you just hit something so profound that I see in so many women is they're chasing like a success in motherhood in this season that looks good on paper. And when they come to me, a lot of times what they expect is like, you're going to help me figure out the 10 steps that enable me to reach this success on paper. And I'm like, take the paper and burn it. Like, this will have you running on a hamster wheel. Whether you are looking at the thing that felt really familiar in entrepreneurship is, all of a sudden I got here and I started chasing the carrot. And then what was so cool and so fun for me is I got to work with, pretty early on as a coach, I got to coach women who already were at the level of success I wanted to be as an entrepreneur. And I was like, they're still chasing the carrot. They're still denying themselves presence and joy and pleasure and celebration because they're working for something that they already have. And the thing that they wanted so bad, the success and the thing that would make them feel so good in this season, was presence, and being present with their children and connecting with themselves and feeling good about their day to day, which didn't always look pretty. It didn't always check things off the boxes, but it felt even better than that. And that, I think, only comes from slowing down. And you said, like, it's not that we ignore the masculine. It's not that we don't create structures and systems and schedules and time blocking. It's not that we think we don't need all of those things, but we can only do so much of those things until we realize, like, there's also a power in sitting down with a hot cup of cacao and feeling the warmth, or looking at your kid and like taking in the texture of their face. Because if there is a gift of motherhood that brings us to a deeper level of spirituality and healing, it is, we have to be present. Because you will make all of the best laid out plans and then your kid's going to get sick. Or you have the best mothering or parenting strategy and then your kid enters a new season and guess what? It doesn't work anymore. There is a strength, but if you think of like a backbone, it is strong, but it has to be flexible. It has to be able to move. It has to be able to flow.
100%.
And that comes from feeling, that comes from the up and downs of emotion. And I think we're so afraid of that flexibility. We're so afraid of that looseness. Like, I don't even like messy. You're right. I don't think messy is even the language I want to use for it anymore. But there is this, like, I think we want this very structured, straight path. And I'm like, okay, that's all good and great if you're looking at something that can get you from A to B, but that's like, that isn't motherhood. You can't win that way. You won't win that way. You'll always feel like you're failing, even when you're like, you'll always see the gap instead of seeing the gain. You're always going to look at what you thought you should have been instead of witnessing the beauty of who you are, who your kid is, and being present to that. And you said, like, I'm so curious if, one, I don't want to forget to ask this. Do you have a recipe for your cacao? This is like my ADHD moment of all of a sudden I'm like, wait, I need you to share the recipe for the way that you make it because it was so, so good. Is that something that you share? which is
Yeah,
great.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm happy to share that.
Do you
Yes.
love how
So
ADHD I just got of like, I'm like in this profound flow. And then all of a sudden my brain is like, but how do we
you're
make the
like,
cacao?
you're like, anyway, talk to us about the recipe.
Yeah. No.
I just want to acknowledge before I share the
Yeah.
recipe. Yes, I'm
Yeah.
happy
No.
to share it. That what you said is, I mean, yes, true. And I also want to point out that motherhood and entrepreneurship are so, so similar because
Yes.
you
Yeah.
have to be flexible. You
Hmm.
cannot be rigid as an entrepreneur. You're not going to make it. You will
No.
fail immediately.
Because
Like,
you'll make a
and
failure
as a
make you a
parent,
failure. Yeah.
absolutely. And even as a parent, like you also, especially as a parent, you have to be incredibly flexible as well. Any level of rigidity, your child will immediately fight you back because
Mm.
children cannot be raised in healthy environments where there's a lot of rigidity. And like you mentioned as well, like there are so my son will be 13 later this year, and we've been through all the stages you can possibly imagine, like all the stages, and we couldn't have possibly made it through all the different stages: newborn, you know, toddler, kid, tween. Now we're entering teenager. With this sense of rigidity, we had to be
Yeah.
flexible.
Yeah. To
And
shift.
flex, yes, and flexibility. The way that I was able to really lean into the wisdom and the strength of flexibility was through my intuition, which all of us
Mm.
mothers have. That's where that phrase mother's intuition comes from. I had to lean into my intuition and know when something wasn't right anymore. I'm like, okay, this worked when my son Liam was 5, 6, 7, but now that he's 8, 9, 10, this isn't working anymore. So I had to lean into my intuitive feminine wisdom to figure out, okay, well, in this stage of his development and his growth, what's going to work for him now? And
Yeah.
many times that didn't come from here. That came from here. I'm pointing to my heart. And we want to think our way through solutions, but 99% of the time we can't. We need to feel our way to the solution. And as soon as I allowed myself to think from my heart as opposed to think from my head, the answer almost always came immediately and it was always accurate.
Hmm.
Um, so I just wanted to touch on that
Yeah.
before sharing
Yeah.
the recipe. Okay. So
Well,
the
will you
recipe that
wait? Hold
I
on.
work, yeah.
Hold on. I know I got so excited for the recipe, but maybe we can link it or share it. But I want to respond to what you just said of like, there's something I think so many women, especially very intellectual women or women who like are very mentally strong, they're terrified. They're probably hearing this and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm not a feelings person. I'm not a crier or whatever, right? They're maybe not as much feeling people as we are. We're both like big sensitive feelers. And I like, there's women who aren't that way. What I like to encourage them is I was like, we're not telling your head to shut off. I'm not telling you to disconnect from your intellectual intelligence. You absolutely need your intellectual intelligence. You need your thoughts. You need your mental capacity. But what I'm saying is you are cut off at the neck. You are missing 80% of your intelligence when you're ignoring your body. And your body is what is reading the other people. So if you want to be successful in relationships or parenting or business, because ultimately business is working with other bodies, you need your body because your brain cannot interpret the intelligence of their body until you learn its language. So instead of thinking it of like, oh, I need to like cut myself off from thinking, it's like, no, you need your holistic whole self online so that you are connected to your information, intellect, intelligence that's like mental in your head and your embodied emotional feeling sensing, because that is just as powerful. It's just as needed. And those two were meant to work together. It's like if you had a 3-legged bar stool and you cut off one of the legs, it's not going to be balanced. It's not going to be mature. And yet we walk around as people who expect ourselves like, oh, I like don't have any inner child work. And it's like, oh, well, no, you do have like an emotional nervous system body that's not working on intellect. It's not working on what you know up here in your head. It's working on what you experienced. It's working on what it knows. And until you learn that language, you are cut off from having any impact or influence on it. So you're repressing this entire part of you that has so, so much power. And I love hearing your story and your journey in that, because I think this is so much of what moms are missing, because I think so many of the parenting experts, they come at a logic. They tell us what to do, right? How many experts are there who tell us what to do as parents? Now, I think that's helpful information. I'm not saying we don't need that. And I'm like, okay, none of that logical matters if I'm too emotionally dysregulated, if I'm too like emotionally flooded or disconnected, right? How many moms are having a hard time stopping yelling at their kids because they're flooded with emotion or because they're completely disassociated from their emotion? All of the tools and tricks of how to stop yelling for your kid, they're not going to matter until you address the like emotional intelligence, not just the logical intelligence. That you can tell that's like a soapbox of mine of like, our telling people what to do only gets you so far without the being, without who you have to become. And that's not just an intellectual story. That's a embodied sense of being, like what you were talking about.
Yes, 100%. And I love that you mentioned about the fact about not turning our head off, quote unquote. And
Yeah.
I just want to reiterate and highlight that I too am also saying, no, you can't, none of us, myself included, none of us can turn off our head. We wouldn't function. We wouldn't survive. Like the brain is literally there to help us survive.
Yes.
All I'm saying and all I'm sharing is the fact that yes, we are capable of having an open mind
Yeah.
and we're capable of having an open heart at the same
Mm.
time. We don't have to have one closed and one open. They both can be open. And you're putting yourself in a highly leveraged position when you're operating with two forms of intelligence as opposed to just one. And
Yes.
your life just becomes so much easier. It's like you're so much more effective as a mother,
Yeah.
as a business owner, as a woman, when both of these forms of intelligence are A, recognized and
Mm-hmm.
accepted, and B, activated. You have to
Yes.
activate your heart center. And when you activate, and by activate it, I mean like open it, lean into it, tune into it, learn to listen to the language of your heart or the voice of your heart. And I always like to say
Mm.
this: the mind yells, the mind loves to yell, the mind loves to scream, the mind
Oh
is
yeah.
very obnoxious. Like I can always hear my mind, right? But my heart, it's
Oh.
very gentle, it's very subtle, it whispers. And
Mm.
that's why it's so easy to ignore it, because it
Mm.
whispers. It doesn't have a loud voice, it's not obnoxious at all. It's very dainty and soft. And that's why I think people just dismiss
Mm.
the calling or the voice of their heart. And I'm telling you, please do not dismiss those whispers. You will regret it. If you hear a whisper, listen, to become silent, i.e., meditation, become silent so that you can hear the whisper and you can discern what it is. And then you can use your mind to act accordingly.
Man, what you just said, it just resonated so deeply in me of how many women are trying to get out of their heads. They're exhausted of the mental chatter. They're exhausted of the mental constant running of their to-do list and what they should do. And like, I don't think I've ever had that language before of like, my mind is really loud, which also like ADHD doesn't help with that. But like my thoughts are like, I'm constantly hearing my thoughts. And I think one of the reasons why I love somatic work and booty yoga is like it's in movement and music and getting into like more feminine embodied healing is that like I finally get a break from my mind. I get a break from my mind, but my mind has been working overtime. My mind is working so hard all of the time because I was disconnected from my body. And I love what you were saying of the two languages. And I even had this thought of like, it's like going back to what you were saying at the beginning of being bilingual, of having two languages and how that's such like a powerful concept. And I had this thought of like, you like, I have never had, no, that's not true. I have had the experience where my family went to Chile and we lived in a house where they only spoke Spanish. And I remember having this, like, it was so hard to not be able to like fully communicate, to fully understand. And we were able to connect on different levels. But having that experience, I think of like, I wished so bad in those moments. I was like, I wish I could speak your language so bad right now, because there was a lack of unity and communication because we were speaking a different language. And how powerful if we have both of those languages online. Like, what a dynamic, powerful thing to have. I mean, one, to be literally bilingual, but also to have this experience of knowing the language of emotion and heart and mind.
Thank you for saying that. I have never thought about it. I guess we both gave each other new perspectives or
Yeah.
new forms of thinking. I had never thought, or rather, I had never made that connection
Yeah.
with, my bilingualism
Yeah.
connected with these two very different languages that I've learned to interpret,
Yeah.
which is, the language of the head and the language of the heart, which are two totally different languages. But yes, I think that's why I was able to, like, I don't know, activate it so quickly, is because my mind has always thought in two languages.
Yes.
I speak two languages
Oh
all
my
day,
God.
every day. Like I speak Spanglish all the time. And so when you said that, I'm like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. I'd never
Yeah.
paused to see it that way,
Yeah.
that it logically makes sense that I was able to interpret and understand both of these languages, because my brain has been primed to do that literally my whole life.
And you know
So,
what's so cool? And this is, I hope this feels good for you to receive. Tell me if it doesn't, legitimately. I
okay.
I was so attracted and like in love with watching you be bilingual. To
Aw,
watch you speak Spanish and English and getting to see the full expression of you.
yeah.
And I think of like how much of you I would have missed out on if I only heard you speak
Aw,
English. If I only like,
aw,
even when I didn't understand you in Spanish, like you would say something and like to someone else, I like there was this like I would have missed out on so much of you. And I think that speaks to this topic we're talking about of we're missing out on each other when we're not speaking
yes.
this language of heart. We're missing out on whole parts of
Mhm.
us because we don't understand this language. And I think our culture is starting to
Yes.
value it. And this is one of the
Yes.
reasons why we wanted to have this conversation, is so that we can start to value this language that is so beautiful and life-giving. And it only makes us that much more potent and
Mhm.
powerful. And it doesn't take away from your English speaking when you spoke Spanish. It added to it. It added this other
Mhm.
layer
Exactly.
of like, in fact, I was sitting there like, I want to speak this language too. Like, it was this beautiful invitation. And I love that as like a place to end, but I'm just wondering if there's anything you would add to that, or just your perspective on how that feels for you.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. That makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside, because
Yeah.
the majority of my community is bilingual. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just being honest here. Like, almost everyone in my sphere is bilingual. So I hadn't heard what you just said ever,
Mm-hmm.
but it makes so much sense
Mm-hmm.
that we would be missing out on like half of a person if we only experienced one side of them, let's say.
Yeah.
And that, what you just said, also is applicable to all of us who are still, I am including myself here, who are still unfolding our hearts. Because if we only show up with our head first, or with our head only,
Mm-hmm.
that's only like half of who we are, or maybe even less
Yeah.
than half of who we are. We're not our
Yeah.
minds. We are, as you said earlier, this is a holistic journey, this journey of being here on earth, this journey, I call it Earth School. Like, we are all here as students on earth, just learning, evolving, transforming, growing constantly. And so to show up as only, I'll just call it half of ourselves or half of our potential or half of who we are, would be like to deprive our loved ones and our friends and our community of this whole other magical half. So
Yeah.
this is like my call to action. Like, let's show up as our whole holistic magical selves, like fully embodied in our mind, fully embodied in our heart. And let's show up as this. If you can envision a heart, there's like two halves, right? And so I've always envisioned like one half is your head, the other half is your heart.
Mm.
And those two, when they come together, they form the heart. If you just saw one side, it's just kind of like this weird curvy thing. But when you put them together, it's a heart. So just, if you can envision that in your mind, that's what happens when you allow yourself to show up open-minded and open-hearted. You show up fully essenced and fully embodied, which is who we all came here to be.
Yeah. And you know what's so beautiful? You showing up in your fullness at that retreat day, it didn't take anything from me. Like you showing up speaking a language that I didn't know yet didn't take anything from me. It didn't leave me out. It didn't leave me feeling like there wasn't space for me. It gave me permission and it actually grew capacity in me. And that's what happens when women become full of themselves. That's what happens when women reconnect with their whole selves and they take up space with all of their neediness and our wantingness of like, we want like reconnecting to those parts of us that like want a shot of cacao or want to go to Costa Rica. When you start taking up space like that, it does not rob other women of space. It gives them permission, and it won't do it to your kids either. I have realized that like I was so terrified that like me pursuing caring for me was like somehow cutting off care from them. But actually what it did is it grew my capacity to give them more because I was cut off from part of myself. So when you show up in your fullness, you're giving other people the best of you. You're giving them all of you. You're giving them all of your capacity because you're no longer just offering them the easy manner that like you're just giving the cultural productivity. You're giving all of you.
Yes. And actually on what you just said, showing up, like expanding your capacity to give the best to your children. Of course, all of us mothers, all of us caretakers, parents, we want to give our best to our children. Like, duh, of course. However, we cannot, if we're not even giving the best to ourselves, if we're feeding ourselves scraps or we're feeding ourselves crumbs or we're feeding ourselves like junk energy, what we put in is what we give out. So when we decide to invest in ourselves, of course, we're going to give our children and our loved ones and anyone that's in our field the best of us because we're putting the best in. Therefore, we're giving the best out. And I do want to end with this. Back in 2015, I believe, it was either 2014 or 2015, I went on my first solo trip because I recognized that I was losing my essence. I was losing myself in motherhood, and I was losing myself in the act of being a wife and being a housewife. And I was so scared of disconnecting from who I am, from what my core essence is, that I was like, I don't want to get lost in this rabbit hole of all these like crazy hats that I'm wearing. And I'm like, I need to reconnect with who I am. And so it was in whatever year, 2014, 2015, I went on my first solo trip. I went to Italy and I was there for 2 weeks and had the most incredible time. And just like you said, Rebecca, when I came back home, of course, I gave my son and my husband and my home the absolute best of me because I had poured so much quality love and energy and fuel into my physical body and into my energetic body that when it came time for me to give, they were only receiving my best. But I
Yeah.
had to be willing to give myself the best first. So after that trip taught me so much, that trip taught me the importance of not neglecting myself, because I had been doing that and I was slowly withering away, and I could feel that. And I was like, I can't keep withering. And so then I made it this like yearly habitual thing, and every year since then I've gone on solo trips to different places around the world to reconnect with my essence. I literally just got back from my solo trip this year that I took to this magical place in Mexico called Tepoztlan, and I spent a week there, and then I spent the previous week in Mexico City, which is where I'm from. And it was just so incredible, again, to fill that energetic tank with the best quality fuel. And now that I'm back in Colorado and back in my rhythm and back into giving and speaking and doing for my people, for my community, for my family, for my household, I have so much energy. Anybody is
Mhm.
going to get the best of me because I poured in the best first. So I
Yeah.
do want to leave with, I would love to end with that message for moms and caretakers everywhere. Please, please, please don't fall into the trap of shame and guilt
Mhm.
of like pouring in and investing in yourself. You're only going to enhance the quality of what you give to others when you decide. It's a decision we all have to make for ourselves. When you decide to pour into your cup and to do it from a place of love
Mhm.
instead of a place of guilt and shame. Just do it
Mm.
from a pour into yourself lovingly, and you will pour into others lovingly too.
That's so good. It's like there's they often say like there's this, the motherhood quote of like, you cannot pour from an empty cup. And I'm like, bullshit. Moms are constantly pouring from empty cups. But that's why it's problematic, is because then eventually they
Exactly.
become empty and now they're pouring from a
Yes.
negativity. So
Yes.
like I think it's so fascinating that motherhood has really become this, honestly, codependent martyrdom of, I am starving myself to feed you. And I'm like, no, you know
Yes.
what happens when you feed yourself, when you receive, when you nourish yourself as a human being who requires needs, who requires wants, you start giving and helping and mothering from a place of nurturing and not starvation. Like starving women will become selfish because they're desperate. They are desperate for something. Women who are well fed, women who are nourished spiritually,
Yes.
mentally, emotionally at any cost, women who recognize that they have to be a priority, they
Yes.
witness that they get to be leaders to their children and give, not always from an overflow, like not always. There are days when my kids are sick where like, or, when you're in the season of babies where you put their literal needs before yours. But like, that's like saying if you're driving and you have to pee, like pee your pants. It's like, no, drive. And then when you get home, go pee. Like, it's not that you just pretend that you don't have needs. It's that sometimes you have to put them off because your kids are more immediate. But we get in this phase where we treat our kids' wants as if they're needs, which, I'm about to go off on a whole nother rabbit trail. So I'll bring myself back of like, when mothers and women are nourished, the way that we lead and parent is fundamentally different. And we're no longer constantly
Yes.
overwhelmed and exhausted. And we don't become these emotional martyrs where our children need to be, where our children have the pressure of needing to make us happy, or their regulations
Yes.
need to regulate our emotions. We become self-sufficient in that, like, we start regulating our emotions. We start caring for our needs. We show up to care for us because we are the adults, and then our kids get to be the kids and just receive from us.
100%. And with everything that you just said, the image that immediately triggered in my mind as like a very simple analogy for any women out there who might be like, oh, I just can't. I just feel so bad. I just feel
Mm,
so guilty. I feel so much shame when I, whatever. Or like the women that are like, oh my God, I could never go on a solo trip. Like I could never leave my children. Like I could never pour into my cup.
mhm.
Here's a very easy analogy that came to mind as I was listening to you speak, Rebecca. So when I was nursing my son, I was eating and drinking like more than I've ever consumed in my life. Like
Yeah,
I was eating so much food,
right.
and not just any food. I was eating very nutrient dense food. My husband was purchasing like extremely expensive vitamins for me because it takes so much calories. Like your body
Yes.
it's burning so many calories to
Mhm.
produce all this milk to
Mhm.
nourish your baby. I literally would have stopped producing milk. I would have stopped feeding my child if I wouldn't have eaten. If
Yeah.
I wouldn't have eaten any food and I would have had no water and I would have taken no vitamins and I wouldn't have eaten all the healthy stuff I was eating at the time, that's it. My milk supply would have been gone, like done, dried up. In order for me to nourish my child with the highest quality milk that I could possibly give him at that time in my life when I was nursing him, I needed to nourish myself
Mm.
with the high quality nutrients and water and vitamins and all the things I was consuming at the time in order to keep my milk supply up, and not just keep my milk supply up, but make sure that it was a nutrient dense milk supply. But the key here is the mother needs to nourish herself first before she has even the capacity to nourish her baby with her milk.
Yeah.
So for those of you women who are out there maybe listening to this and you're feeling bad or feeling guilty, and if you've had the experience of nursing, you will know your body needs so much food and drink when you're in that stage of nursing, and you would never feel guilty for eating or drinking in order to produce breast milk. So this is very similar to that. I'm saying apply that same mentality, apply that same energy to all of motherhood, not just that period where you're nursing your baby.
Yeah.
The entire experience of mothering your children requires you to consume the highest
Mm.
quality nutrients of all kinds.
Yeah.
Food nutrients, friends are nutrients too. Movement is a nutrient. Mental health, doing things for your mental health, that's another nutrient. Never ever feel bad or guilty for nourishing yourself so that you can better nourish your children.
Yeah. And I think a lot of women use the phrase mom guilt for this scenario, right? Where like they're choosing themselves over their kids. And I'm really trying to bring a new language of that feeling of discomfort isn't guilt, because guilt is doing something wrong, right? I
Yes.
think what a lot of women are experiencing is shame, which is you feel like there's something you should do and you're not doing
Mhm.
it, which there's going to be 1.5 million of those as a mom, and you're never going to win because depending on the expert, depending on the book, there's all these other shoulds. But really, what you're feeling is the conflict of being a leader, the conflict of they need something and I need something. And there's a discomfort,
Mhm.
there's an uncomfortability of using your intuition to have to choose in moments of like,
Mhm.
okay, can
Mhm.
I meet the baby's need right now and meet my need later? How do I make decisions with my time and my energy and my attention of focus so that both of our needs get met? Because both of us are on the train
Mhm.
of like, we're not saying don't take care of your baby. We're saying in order to take care of your kids, you have to take care of yourself. Short term,
Mhm.
sure. Short term, sometimes you're going to have to cut costs for yourself. I believe that there is a sacrifice that comes with motherhood, but you have to be willing to repay that sacrifice and relearn how to receive and learn how to lead and nourish yourself well. Because if you build your entire motherhood on guilt and self-sacrifice, it won't just negatively impact you, it will negatively impact your kids. And I say that because I know that that's one of the greatest motivators is we could do this as like a guilt shame thing, or we could say like, it's amazing to get to mother from a place of nourishment. It's
Mhm.
so good.
Yes.
It's so much easier. It's so much more fun.
It
It,
changes the entire experience.
yes. And it changes things for your kids too. Like, I think my kids get to
100%.
experience me as a mom in a way that they would never have if I
Yes.
wouldn't have pursued what I want. And I don't just mean my business. I think my business is a beautiful benefit of it, but having a mother who prioritizes my needs as a necessity and my wants as a necessity, like my humanity matters just as much as theirs, because I want them to grow up watching what a healthy adulthood looks like, not just me. I realized when my daughter was very young, she's going to grow up learning how to care for herself, not how I love her, by watching how I love
Mhm.
me. She's going to learn body
Exactly.
image by watching how I treat my body. She's going to learn relational marriage by how I am or am not speaking up for myself, or, the kind of relationships I'm in. She's going to learn female relationships by the women that I bring her around. She's going to learn
Yes.
these things by watching me embody them. And so at first it started for her. And then I realized, like, oh, I deserve all of these things too. Like, if it's true for her, it's
Mhm.
also true for me, because I'm just as much a human as she is. Oh,
Yes.
I could talk to you all day, Victoria.
I
I
know.
don't know how to
We
cut
would
us
need to
off.
like,
We'll have to do another
maybe
one.
this is like part one.
Part one with Victoria. Thank you so, so much for being with me today. Is there any like last things that are just like burning for you to say? And then also just tell people where they can find you. Of course, we'll have links in the bio. If you have a recipe that you want to share that you're good with sharing, I'm dying to know it. Um, but yeah, I'd love for you to just, if there's any last thoughts or where people can find you.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so last thoughts are: you are worthy, you
Mm,
are whole, and you are valuable right
mm,
now in this moment.
yeah.
Be present. You deserve presence. It's okay
Mhm.
to be present. So, those
Yeah.
are my last thoughts. And in regards to handles, I mean, you can follow the Latina Owned Collective on Instagram at Latina Owned Collective. Or if you're interested in working with cacao, my cacao company is at apapacho_cacao. I know that's a crazy word, and we're going to put the links, but
Yeah.
if you want to look it up right now, it's basically just A and then Papa and then Cho, APAPACHO_cacao. In regards to the recipe, I created a recipe in 20, yeah, I guess it was 2019, which is this recipe that I'm going to share is the creation of our first blend, which we called our love blend.
Okay.
So it's basically just um, around 6 to 8 ounces of, it can either be water, or if you want it a little bit creamier, you can use oat milk.
Mm,
Macadamia milk also tastes really, really good with cacao. You can find
mm,
macadamia milk at like Vitamin Cottage. So oat, macadamia, or water. Um, and I would put in about 20 to 30 grams of cacao. So I don't know if
mm,
you have one of those little scale things at home, you can
mhm.
measure it, which is always easy. Our product, we have like little hearts in our bags, and each of our
Yeah.
heart pieces are 10 grams. So it's very easy to measure how much
Oh,
cacao
cool.
you're consuming.
Yeah.
So like 20 to 30 grams of cacao mixed with 6 to 8 ounces of the liquid of your choice.
Yeah.
And then I would add, to sweeten it, either honey or agave or maple syrup. Any of those
Mm,
sweeteners are fantastic with cacao. And
yeah.
our recipe is literally just coconut sugar, cacao, a little bit of Himalayan sea salt, vanilla,
Mm,
vanilla extract, rose powder,
yeah.
and a little bit of cayenne. The cayenne just
Oh,
helps your body just absorb the cacao a little bit faster because it stimulates blood flow, and it just
yeah.
helps you receive the energy just a lot faster because your blood is flowing
The
faster. Just a
feeling,
little bit of
the
cayenne.
feeling
You
was
don't.
like the best. It was like, I
Yes.
seriously was like, I want to have this every morning. Um, and so that, would you share just like really quickly? I know we've gone so long. What is like a quick way that they can create like a ritual or a ceremony with it?
Yes. Okay. So I literally will just share with you what I did. This
Yeah.
is exactly what I did. I'd prepare my cup. I'd go down. If you have like a space in your home that is your sacred space, go
Yeah.
there. Go. And if you don't have a sacred space, I recommend going outside.
Mm,
Connecting with nature is always the fastest way to connect to your divinity. And
yeah.
so go outside or go to your sacred space, and then create a moment of presence. I would always place my hands over my cup of cacao, and I would place a very specific intention into my cup of cacao. Cacao has very
Mm,
feminine energy. So, again, anything with feminine energy receives, magnetizes, attracts, takes in. So, I'd place my hands over my cup. I'd place a very specific intention into my cup of cacao. I'd express some gratitude for the moment.
yeah.
Gratitude is also I highly recommend that as just like a daily practice in your life. I'd express some gratitude for my life, for my cup of cacao. And then I would give myself a few seconds or minutes to be really present, just to look
Yeah.
at the cacao, to smell it, to feel the warmth, just to really be present with the cup. And then I would slowly drink it. I'd play whatever music I was feeling that day. Like maybe I was feeling singing bowls, like maybe I was feeling more like meditation music. Sometimes I'd play like love. There's like this love frequency. It's like however many hertz. I don't even remember how many hertz that is. It's kind of dependent on what like energy I wanted to work with that day. So I'd play some music. I'd light a little incense stick. I always use copal. I have this lovely Mexican copal that I've been using forever and ever and ever. You can use whatever incense stick you like. Copal is what we use in Mexico for ceremonies. So that's always what I light when I have a cacao ceremony. And and a journal, because when I drink cacao, I call them downloads. I get all these downloads of information, and it's information from my higher self. And it's like she is able to connect with me a lot easier when I'm drinking a cup of cacao. And so I just would receive the most beautiful messages. So I would always have a journal and a pen nearby to just write all the things that I was receiving. Again, receiving feminine energy. And that's it. I would sit in this space for about probably 30 minutes. Oh, I'd also light a candle just to signify to myself, like, okay, I'm illuminating, I'm creating this space in my life to turn on my own light, to illuminate my own life. And so the candle was always very symbolic for me as well, to light that candle to symbolize the beginning of bringing light and love into my life. So again, I could share that light and love with my family and with others.
Yeah.
So those are all the elements that I used: incense, candle, music, journal, and cacao.
Yeah. And what I love about that is all of it is just, it's the intention, it's not a list that someone has to check, you could make it and just speak intention and then drink it out and outside on your patio, taking 5 minutes for yourself. It's slowing down and having ritual and ceremony, which is something that we don't often have when we're so focused on doing. So what a beautiful way to connect. Thank you so much for taking a moment to drop that in, because I really wanted people to be able to know the experience of it and giving permission to slow down, because I think we're so, in our culture, we're so disconnected from being behaviors. We're very connected to give me my morning routine. And this is more hey, take some time to be with you. Take some time to drop into your senses, into the warm cup, and drinking it and tasting it and feeling it move through your body and seeing how it makes you feel. So again, thank you so much for being here. I have just really enjoyed and received this conversation. So it's just lit me up. So I'm so glad I know you, and I'm so glad that I got to bring this conversation for other women. And we'll definitely have to come back for part 2.
Yes. Well, the love, the admiration, and the respect is mutual, Rebecca. So thank you for having me here. It was my pleasure and my honor. And muchas gracias.
Yes. And for any of you listening, if you have any questions, we would love to hear from you. We'd love to hear how this resonated with you, your aha moment. So definitely tag us, definitely go follow Victoria, and we will talk to you later. Thanks for hanging out today on the Motherhood Mentor Podcast. If you loved today's episode, share it with a friend or tag me in your stories on Instagram so that we can connect. Take up audacious space in your life, and I'll see you next time.